Hi everybody, Meteorologist Joe Rao here on this Tuesday, the 8th of January. I'm rushing it already. The 8th of January, 2019. Hope everybody's had a great day. Got a lot of weather stuff going on that we're going to talk about tonight, but let me just put it out there right at the very beginning so everybody pay attention. Tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, we are going to have Dr. Judah Cohen on, and he's going to talk all about the stratosphere, the polar vortex, the split, what it means, what it doesn't mean, what it can mean, and all the other possibilities in between. Joe Rao will be joining the live stream as well tomorrow night, so mark that down at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. We are going to also tonight be looking at the weather threat for the weekend, which seems to be front and center. You always know when you're having a subpar winter as far as snow is concerned, because snow lovers are basically just grasping at every snowflake opportunity that they can get their hands on. And I have been saying over the last several days that we're probably not going to get this resolved until we get at the earliest until Wednesday or Thursday of this week. I'm still on that page. However, I think at this point, one of the things that I think we could say with regards to other geographic areas outside of my zone, which is eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, including New York City, touching down to Philadelphia, New Jersey, Hudson Valley, southern New England, Long Island, we can start to think about the idea that there is going to be an increasing threat for accumulating snows extending from the middle Mississippi Valley, Missouri, southern Iowa, a good chunk of the state of Illinois, but south of Chicago, running east across Kentucky, and then into and southern Ohio, southern Indiana, and then eventually moving eastward into Virginia, North Carolina, and maybe up into Maryland and Delaware, the way it looks right now. Areas a bit further north than that, southern Pennsylvania, going up into southern New Jersey. I think that's where you could wind up seeing, at least from what we're looking at the moment, is where the models seem to be kind of keying on where the northern fringe of this is going to be. But I want to emphasize that there's still plenty of time, and there's a lot of room for models to maneuver in the next couple of days because of the nature of the jet stream that we have, the volatile nature of the models in and of themselves. I was speaking with a colleague of mine, just amazed at the mess, as he described it, in terms of the upper air, with shortwave troughs running around all over the place. So this is all having impact on the models from run to run, the state of the Pacific, and its impact on the jet stream pattern, the split nature of the jet stream. It leads to a lot of forecast volatility. And I took my Patreon members on my subscription platform today on a bit of an adventure regarding the models and having them look at it and try and figure out what's going on. They did actually a very, very good job, but they also noted the essential state of confusion that exists in the upper atmosphere. Let me just really quick say hi to those of you from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut Stormwatch page, from Angry Ben's Angry Weather page on Facebook, also from my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Rao, and from my weather app for Android devices. Welcome to all of you as you join this live stream. We're going to also look at what's going on in Europe. Again, the impact of the cold air coming down from Siberia really impacting weather in Central and Southern Europe. Again today, I have a live on my Facebook page today. I put up something from Severe Weather Europe showing the extent of some of the snow that is in parts of southern Austria, where it looks like it's just one huge mega pile of snow being down there on the ground in feet rather than in inches. So the winter certainly seems to be going gangbusters in Europe, and welcome to my viewers from Europe, because you're going to have weather issues with this cold weather pattern for the next couple of weeks and probably even beyond that. So let's start front and center with current weather, and I'm going to bring up the watches and warnings. We've got a few interesting things going on here in the east at the moment. Just give me 1 second, folks. I want to throw a little light on in here, a little better lighting for me. So it looks like ski country in upstate New York and in New England should be making up some ground in the next several days. We have winter storm warnings up for pretty much the northern half of the state of Maine, with advisories for the southern half. Same holds for New Hampshire and same for Vermont. Northeastern New York under a winter storm warning. We have winter storm warnings up for southwestern New York. We also have winter weather advisories and a stripe of winter storm warnings in the mountains of West Virginia. This is a situation where you are going to see snows extend southward down into those West Virginia mountains, and there could be some significant snows in where the warnings are up to about a foot of snow. So this is going to be more on the west side of the mountains rather than on the eastern side. And out in the west, we have the latest round of weather coming in to the west coast, and we're seeing winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories up for parts of Northern California on through Northern Oregon and up into the state of Washington and Northern Idaho. In between all that, just want to notice the darker brown that runs from North Dakota southeastward into Iowa and Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, over through West Virginia, and in the mountains of Virginia and North Carolina. We do have wind advisories that are up because of the strengthening storm that's going to be developing in New Brunswick that is going to create very strong winds. You've got a deep low in eastern Maine that will develop in eastern Maine and then head very, very slowly eastward from there. A high coming down into Minnesota and the northern Great Lakes. Very, very tight pressure gradient. Very large change in pressure over relatively small distance sets the table for some strong wind conditions that are going to last probably into a Thursday night and early Friday. Here's a satellite loop tonight. Here in the east, it's kind of odd because when you look at the radar, and I'll show it to you in a second, we actually have a radar with thunderstorms running across parts of northern Pennsylvania and into southwestern New York State with this cold front and the return of cold air. That warm sector we showed you yesterday with regards to the temperatures that were up into the 60s in parts of Kentucky and Ohio. Some of that 60-degree weather, certainly the 50s, made it into southwest PA. So you had this warm sector that's set up, and as a result, you actually have some thunderstorms in there, which you don't often see up this way this time of year. And in the meantime, over my neck of the woods, where the warm front never made it today, which really kind of shocked me a bit. With the lack of snow cover, you would think the warm front would have an easy pass all the way up. It just never mixed down to the bottom part of the atmosphere. The warmer air did come in at the higher levels, but it never did mix down into the bottom of the atmosphere. So as a result, and we still have it right now, we have dense fog in and around the New York City area this evening, not into New York City itself, but in areas surrounding New York City. We do have some restricted visibilities. That should come up once this, once this weather front moves on through. Subtropical moisture from the Pacific streaming northeastward into Mexico and Texas. And of course, you've got this next round of moisture coming into the western part of the United States. Just going to bring up WPC's, the Weather Prediction Center's 7-day rainfall forecast map. The activity is really going to center now that we're getting rid of this system in the Northeast slowly. I mean, in my neck of the woods, my area. We're going to have some precipitation tonight, but I wanted at least you can get a clue as to how much is going to be produced by what's going on for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with low pressure that's going to be coming out of Texas and Oklahoma and then moving basically eastward from there. And you can pick out the darker green. Before you get into the blue, that darker green is basically 1/4 to 1/2 an inch. So the first blue is 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch, but you've got 1/4 to 1/2 an inch through southern Kentucky, on in through southern Virginia, North Carolina. You know, a lot of this in this area here through Missouri and back into southern Kansas, a lot of this is going to wind up being snow. So there might be some significant amounts in some areas here as we head toward late week and into the weekend. And of course, all of this is going to be tracking eastward. And the big question for my area is going to be, well, how far north is this all going to get? Now, in the west, because of this fire hose jet in the Pacific that's been in place, so we've just getting this sort of endless stream of moisture coming in, and the trough is kind of shifting a bit offshore now, but it's close enough where we are seeing significant rains up and down the immediate coast of California on the order of several inches or more, and particularly in Northern California, north of San Francisco, getting hit pretty hard with rain over the next 7 days. And we continue to see very heavy rains up in the extreme northwest corner of Washington and Oregon, and then running north and west from there into Vancouver, westernmost British Columbia. I can't see what goes on beyond the point where the map does cut off. Notice, by the way, in Florida, except for the immediate east coast, the entire, just a good chunk of the peninsula itself is going to be rain-free in the next 7 days. So a bit of a dry period if you're vacationing down in Florida through all of this that's going on in the east. You may have picked a pretty decent time from the standpoint of sky conditions. And we'll see how it plays out with temperatures after this system over the weekend makes it to the east, and how far south is the cooler air going to push into Florida. So we're going to take a look at I want to go to Weather Service snowfall forecasts that are coming up for this system that we're dealing with tonight and for the next couple of days in New England. And there we go. So we'll get this up here on the board, and this is where it'll stay now for the remainder of the night, unless we go to the paint box a little later, which we might do. So this is this is the Weather Service's, their offices. Rather than pull all the individual maps, you can go to their website and get their, pull up the whole geography and just kind of pick what plot you want. So this is snowfall that goes through 7 p.m. Friday. This is as far out as it goes, and you can see that the snowfall here is pretty significant up in Maine, 1 foot plus. Through a good chunk of northern Maine. Also notice up in northern Vermont, back through upstate, far northern New York, and in and around Lake Ontario, you've got the lake effect machine that's going to be working overtime, and also some lake effect from just east of Buffalo southwestward into southwestern New York State and into northwestern Pennsylvania. And that snow, by the way, looks like, again, this is all with the setup here with northerly winds that favors the snow driving southward in through western Pennsylvania and eastern Ohio. So it's, and also in Ohio east of Cleveland. And you're talking, snows that wind up reaching far south into West Virginia, where we've got some 1 foot plus amounts in some of the mountains there in the eastern part of the state, lesser amounts as you go down out to the west, and even some snow down into southeastern Ohio, and just skimming into eastern Kentucky. A little bit of that extends inside the Virginia border, the western part of the Virginia border, down into extreme northwestern North Carolina, extreme northeastern Tennessee. Some snow shower activity getting down pretty far to the south. Out further west, you're also, by the way, seeing action with those northerly winds in and around the Great Lakes, with a fair amount of snow being generated there. And now I'm going to, hopefully this map will update fairly quickly. Now, you're going to also begin to see, this only goes to 7 p.m. Friday. So we are, at this point, only going to begin to see the snow that is forecast for parts of Kansas and Missouri. So we really kind of need to go out another 12 to 18 hours at least. The map is having a difficult time loading here for some odd reason. Sometimes if I widen it out, it might load a little bit faster. So I think we'll do that. We'll widen it out. So you're just beginning to see the first patches of snow in parts of Missouri. And also through Friday, we're looking at snows in, really not a whole lot, in the Rockies, in the central Rockies, the mountains of California. And then it kind of goes gangbusters up here in the Northwest. There's a 94 print there that I saw. Hang on, let me pull out again. Let's see if I can bring that 94 print up. There, come on, plot. There it is. So here you see where Seattle is, Everett, Tacoma, Seattle, Everett, and Abbott's Abbottstored or Abbottstored. I don't know if I don't know if I'm pronouncing that well, but there's actually a 94-inch print in one of the mountains up there. That's just absolute. I can't even. I don't really comprehend that. And I've never been up to the Pacific Northwest. It's on my list of places to go. And one of these days, I'm going to make it up there and learn what all that all about that geography. I've been told so many times that is a beautiful part of the U.S., the Pacific Northwest. It's breathtaking. So I will get there one of these days. Okay, so now looking ahead, we've got the surface map here in the east. Look at that warm front. It is just pinched down here across southern New Jersey. We've got temperatures in the 50s and 60s in Virginia, down in the Delmarva Peninsula into North Carolina, 50s, up middle and upper 50s and low 60s in the warm sector that's pushed up into western New York. So this is where we're seeing some of the thunderstorms on the radar. And of course, you've got this marine air that just sort of wedged itself in eastern Pennsylvania and over New Jersey and into southern New England. Weather models were forecasting temperatures a couple of days ago to reach up into the 50s by me, and it didn't even get out of the low and middle 40s. And that only happened right along the immediate coast. In areas just north and west of New York City, it never did even get out of the 30s today. I mean, that's how stubborn this warm air is, and how weather models can sometimes really not grasp the fact that, yeah, the warm air makes it up 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet and higher, but it never mixes down to the ground, and as a result, we've got these issues with dense fog. Now we've got two cold fronts to come through. One that is moving through Ohio and eastern Michigan. It turns colder behind it, but it's the second front that is analyzed late this afternoon. I'll put the latest. I should have the 21Z map here. And the second front, which is has now been analyzed to be through Milwaukee, just about approaching Chicago. We're seeing the cold air. You start to drop into the teens, single digits, and then you get up into Canada, and you start seeing the below zero reading. So this is the very cold high that is going to be building in, and eventually we're going to have these two lows kind of merge into one, and you're going to have a deep storm that's going to be over eastern Maine and then over New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. Notice up in northern New England and up through much of Maine, temperatures are in the teens and 20s. So there is some cold air there now as we watch the radar echoes moving northward. Look at the convection here on the radar tonight. We'll freshen this page up just a bit. And let me make sure you guys it's centered in a good spot, and it is. But you'd think we were looking at something in the middle of spring with these bands of heavy downpours, and I did notice on radars that can show you the lightning strikes that we are seeing lightning strikes, or at least we're seeing lightning strikes in this complex that is moving through central Pennsylvania. This is going to reach New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, Hudson Valley, and southern New England sometime between, say, 10 p.m. on the western flank and midnight to 1 o'clock on the eastern flank. Once that gets through, that's when we'll start to see genuine improvement in weather conditions. Not too much else happening radar-wise. When we look around, there's some stuff off the Florida Keys, and then out in the west is where it's also a bit busy tonight as we look around in California, particularly in central and northern California. We talked about from WPC's forecast that this is where their concentration is of the heavy rain, and also we've got a lot of moisture coming in up into working its way up through coastal Oregon and into Washington State, and of course in the colder air in the mountains, this is falling as heavy snow. So you've got the current weather picture going on, and I think now we could start to move forward with where we're headed here in the next couple of days and through the weekend and into the longer term. So on to the GFS model. I'm going to start with the current upper air. I'll make it a bit bigger. Let's see. I think that works. All right. And what I'm going to do is, at least to get things started, let's describe the pattern and what's been happening with respect to the weather pattern overall. Okay, so we'll bring this down a bit further, and we're all set on the paint box. So one of the changes that we've seen in the last number of days is the relaxation of this screaming Pacific, as I've been describing it, this screaming Pacific jet. And while it is still screaming across the Pacific, it is interrupted by this deep trough and cutoff low that is developed off the coast of Washington and Oregon. Okay, and always remember there are downstream impacts to when we see all this stuff that goes on. So if you've got a deep trough, you're going to have a strong ridge to support that. And in fact, that has allowed a ridge to pop up from Mexico northwestward into southwestern Canada. And as a result, you now have a cold flow of air that is coming down out of northern Canada into the northern plains and the Great Lakes. And eventually, once this upper low here, this little vortex that has formed, once that moves a little bit further to the east and the trough shifts eastward, you're going to see that cold air get into the east, into the northeast, down into the mid-Atlantic states. I think that the cooler air may bleed down southward into the Carolinas, and this is going to be over the next couple of days. While this is all happening, by the way, you also have up in the upper right this is part of that very strong upper high that has been sitting just to the west of England and Ireland. It is extremely strong in that it's producing higher than normal pressures back through Greenland and nearby. So we do have, we have a block in a way that this blocking high is behaving a bit differently than a block that eventually winds its way across Greenland. It is to some extent causing cold air, because it's so strong, its impact is pretty far to the west. It is forcing cold air to be displaced southward into the Great Lakes and eventually into the eastern part of the United States. And that is, you've got action going on here on both sides. You've got things going on in the Atlantic, you've got things going on in the Pacific that are very important to the overall scheme of things. And because the Pacific is really relaxed enough, and you've got this big blocking high that doesn't really get out of the way, that's actually going to hold the cold air in place for a little while, at least into the start of next week. And the breakdown of that blocking high to the north might be key as to what we're going to see later next week. And I'll explain that in just a bit. Now, with regards to the upper air pattern, we are going to see this, as I said, this deepening storm, and you can see the trough that winds up going up into New England. We've got the ridge in the west, the block up into the north, in the North Atlantic there, back through England, still holding. And that, by the way, is also impacting the weather in Europe, which we will get to. Energy is coming into the west. We still have ridging up in the west and troughing in the east. And we are going to see some energy come into the southwest on Friday and then get pushed along to the east. Watch what's happening across eastern Canada. That upper low weakens a bit, and it just kind of gets stretched out. And you've got more energy that's trying to drop down in that northern part of the jet stream. And the southern part, depending on which model run you look at, either holds up or gets lost to some degree. This is not the best looking upper air with regards to bringing a snow event up the East Coast, because if you look at the winds, the way the lines are going off the Carolinas, they're basically going west to east. You don't really have this lifting up and around as some prior model runs have shown. But I would be very careful in this because of the fact that you've got so much energy running around in the west. We really kind of have to wait for all of this to come inland and see how models react to all of this, because there have been a number of different solutions regarding energy in the northern stream and how it times out with that southern shortwave. I think the odds, are every day the odds kind of increase that this is going to wind up getting suppressed to the south of New York City, and this could have perhaps have bigger impact for Washington, for Baltimore, maybe up to about Philadelphia. I don't want to really take anything off the table here. I'm just kind of looking at this literally, but recognize the fact that there are still a lot of variables at play, because there's just so much noise when you look at this. There's so many short waves, so much energy. I think the northern part of this jet stream is going to be very key to how this all plays out. And then eventually, as we go through into next week, you still have this kind of split flow. You have a polar connection that runs from Canada. It weakens a little bit, but it's still fairly evident from northern Canada to Lake Winnipeg, running across the northern lakes and into the northeast. So that with this trough off the east coast, it would at least limit how much moderation in temperature you would see. At the same time, you have a resumption of this fire hose back across the Pacific into the west coast. So it's kind of a delicate balance here. The other thing I did notice as we go through the longer term later next week is that the fire hose jet might appear, but it looks like it may be temporary, because we have the formation of another deep upper low off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, which brings that ridge back up in the west, and you get that a bit of a polar connection from northern Canada into the Great Lakes and Northeast as we move through time. This is the late afternoon GFS, which actually by the end of the period, before the end of the period, right around day 11 and 12, it starts to show it getting very cold. That's at the point where I have we don't have no idea whether this is going to wind up being this way. It would sort of match up with what we've been seeing with the split of the polar vortex up in the stratosphere in terms of the timing, giving it about a 2-week lag. But again, I've been emphasizing you want confirmation. You want days and days of the model showing the same thing, or roughly the same thing over and over again. But the key is that in the Pacific, there's an attempt to reestablish that strong fire hose jet to flood the U.S. with warm air, but it's cut off after a day or two. The other key is in the Atlantic is that big upper high that's over England and Ireland winds up breaking down, okay? And then you get ridging that tries to come back up along 40 West and heads up toward Greenland. So, this is kind of giving perhaps a different angle in terms of how the weather might evolve in the longer term. All highly speculative after, we're still considering what we're having here in the short range as being highly speculative. So we know that going this far out is extremely highly speculative. So back to now, we'll bring up the surface map. We'll go back to day 1. And let's get close up. By the way, I have I guess we can call it just a little bit of a surprise when we get toward the end of the analysis. And it's something that I can't really show you, but I can at least describe it to you. Okay, so here's how the GFS late this afternoon handles this next system that is coming east. Here's your, by Friday, of course, notice the gradient in the east, by the way, very tight. You can see where all the snow is going to get generated from between the lake effect, those strong northerly winds coming down from northeastern Canada. This is going to be a pretty strong shot of cold air, especially at the low levels of the atmosphere. I think you're going to see some very low temperatures across upstate New York and in New England out of this as this high builds in. And here comes your low with, by Saturday morning, a fair amount of snow across Missouri, Illinois, Indiana. And when I looked at this late this afternoon and saw it come in, I noticed that it had a bit more robustness to it and pushing the northern edge of snow up into almost Erie, Pennsylvania, and right along the Pennsylvania-New York state line. So at this point, Saturday night, I'm thinking, this might wind up, on the model run, maybe it's going to take it further to the northeast. But it's from here that it winds up getting squashed somewhat. But meanwhile, note, across Missouri, St. Louis might do actually pretty well with this. Through much of Illinois, Indiana, maybe the extreme south gets where the rain snow line is, but into West Virginia, Ohio, and then eventually into Western Virginia, Western North Carolina. There's going to be that cold air that's going to try to wedge southwestward down the mountains here, and the GFS does show an area of freezing rain and some heavier snow in Western North Carolina, Western Virginia. You would think that this time around, it seems like the northern edge of the snow would get further to the north. The latest run would bring the northern edge of the snow for a few hours to about New York City before it gets suppressed to the south and then pulled away, and it pulls away to the northeast. One of the things I did notice late this afternoon, which was kind of interesting, is the new NAM. Now, the NAM's not out far enough yet, but it is at least in a range where we could see how it sees the upper air, and this is at 84 hours. So we're looking here at 1 a.m. Saturday, okay? The trough, you can see the southern part of the shortwave running from Kansas down into Texas. You can also pick out a second shortwave that's moving into Minnesota and into South Dakota. Two distinct, the two streams are still pretty separate here, but I did notice on the NAM, and this is something that we'll have to watch to see if there's any truth to this. I kind of like this, it takes part of that northern shortwave and just starts to bring it down, and phase might be a bit of a strong word to describe this, but it has a much sharper look at this time frame versus the GFS and the other models. Now, I don't know if it's onto something. This could be nonsense. Confirmation of many runs will be key. This is 84 hours out, and it's still well before any precip is going to arrive into the mid-Atlantic and into the Northeast. And by the way, if you'll notice, you have this east-west trough that runs from just north of Maine back westward to Lake Superior there in that northern part of the jet stream. So there is a suppressive look to the jet stream in southeastern Canada. You have to get, some of that has to get out of the way in order to get the system coming in to be able to lift far enough north. Here's how it looks on the precip on the NAM, by the way. And I was kind of impressed by what it sees as snow through Missouri and in through Illinois and into Iowa. It's pretty far to the north. So my first impression of this was, when I saw it, was, well, if it's this far to the north, it's hard to imagine how you're not going to see the northern fringe of snow make it up into southern New England, at least on Sunday. But that assumes that the upper air is going to cooperate, and we don't know if that is the case. By the way, with respect to, we could kind of we'll look at the snow amounts. I'm going to go to the GFS and at least if we're starting to talk about the possibility of some snow for the middle Mississippi and the lower Ohio Valley, I think, we can, safely look at some of the snow maps that are being generated, and might be better if we use the 24-hour snowfall, so we can get rid of, whatever's falling up from the lake effect and behind this storm for the next couple of days in New England. But so here we have 24-hour snowfall amounts, and it looks like some 6-inch amounts in southern Missouri, a 4 being printed out near St. Louis. Looks like a general 1 to 4 inch snowfall, maybe a bit more across Illinois and Indiana. And now you've got some significant snows being of 6 inches plus in western North Carolina, northwestern South Carolina, and even into northeastern Georgia showing up. Eastern West Virginia, western Virginia, the northern fringe of the accumulating snow on the GFS, in spite of its rather suppressed look, you can see how far north it gets. But you know what? If you take out that darker blue, which is basically a coating to an inch, and just kind of focus on the slightly lighter colored blues, it would say, at least on the GFS, that the northern fringe of snow makes it to about New York City for a brief time before it goes away. And by the way, the European snow map doesn't really, it's not too far off from what the GFS has. It actually matches up fairly well. The European actually brought measurable snow to about New York City and western Long Island, and it brought 3 to 6 inch snows into southern New Jersey, southeastern Pennsylvania, and southern Pennsylvania, south central PA, and then on southward into Maryland, Delaware, and on up into the Washington D.C. area. Much of Virginia was in a 6 to 9, 9 to 12 band from what I saw. So the European supports the idea that, at least for the Mid-Atlantic states, that this could be a significant snowfall for this area. Of course, this would wind up being the second one, and it might also come out from the standpoint of how it looks on the weather maps. There are striking similarities in terms of the overall pattern. I've said many times that in winters, patterns don't always repeat exactly, but they do have a rhyming sense, and that could be that I think has to play into part of the equation. Now, for my friends in Europe who have been patiently waiting to see what are we going to be talking about as far as European weather is concerned, first we're going to take a look at the upper air on the late day GFS, starting from a few days ago with this really deep trough from Siberia down into the southern Mediterranean. Now, a second trough has replaced that and is dropping southward now into the same area as the one we've just had. So there could be some snows again in places that don't see snow that often, but just saw it in the last several days. In parts of Italy, down into southern Italy and Sicily, for example, not out of the question. In parts of Greece that don't normally see snow. Now, this trough, at the same time, you've got this big upper high over England and Ireland, and that has kept things relatively calm and stable in that part of the world. But as we go through time, the general trend of the models has been to emphasize the idea that you're going to see a gradual shift westward of this deep trough that's bringing in the colder air. You'll notice there's another strong short wave that comes into the North Sea and moves into Germany and Poland, dropping into that trough position. But each one makes a bit more of a dent in that upper high. The high is still there east of France 5 days from now, but there is a colder flow that's coming in a bit further to the west. And then finally, after that, as we go out to day 7, so we're at a week from today, the upper high is almost gone. And it's at this point that we start to get significantly colder air moving into western parts of Europe and England and Ireland. Each one's going to have a different view in terms of the magnitude, but we are going to finally see that upper high break down and open the Atlantic train of storms and begin moving them eastward. So some cold air is going to get involved in all of this. And when we look at the surface map, because we do have some action going on at the moment. I did mention the fact that I put on Facebook from Severe Weather Europe about the big, this is the snowstorm that's causing the big problems throughout much of Central Europe. You're looking at much of Germany, Eastern Germany into Poland, Austria, Hungary, all getting some big snows here, and you've got a storm down into the Mediterranean that's causing some issues there with rain and snow, and another wave later this week that moves southeastward. You can see that much of the rain has been going north of England and Scotland, kind of grazing it, and then moving southeastward from there. That's around the periphery of the upper high. And over time, as that ridge finally gets eroded, now you start to see the colder air. And here we are at day 9 and 10. So we've come in another day from yesterday, and the models are fairly consistent, showing cold air and maybe the chances for some snows up in parts of Western Europe and up into England and Ireland in the longer term. I couldn't, really put a number down. I'm not really that familiar at all with terms of the topography. You folks know your areas well and how things work far better than I do. I can give you what the general model view is in terms of total snowfall, but this only goes out 10 days. And again, for Europe, for England and Ireland, it's going to be, got to wait that 10-day period out. A little bit more increasing snow up in Scotland, though, in northern England. But you can see the really bullish snowfall from eastern France through Germany, especially when you get into Poland and the Ukraine, and of course up into Siberia, up into Russia, and on up into Norway, Sweden, some really big amounts. But even as you go further south into the Czech Republic, into Slovakia, down over into Greece, and points south, you can see the extensive snow being forecast for Italy. I know a lot of that is mountainous terrain, but nonetheless, it is snow even down into Sicily, Sardinia, Crete, Sardinia, and also in on actually even Cyprus. We're looking at Malta. That's what I was trying to think of. I'm sorry, Malta, and in the Greek side of the Mediterranean, where you've got the islands there, where there's elevation on a lot of those islands, and they're going to see snow as well. So it's a little bit lacking in eastern France and down into Spain and Portugal, southern England and Ireland, but it'll be after the 10-day period that we're going to see changes here with regards to the snowfall. So I hope that gives you at least a little bit of idea of what's working in the upper air and driving your winter pattern. So I'm coming back to the board now. Hang on, stay with me, okay? Hopefully you guys are still there. Good. Now, I can't show this to you, but I can look at it. And what I am going to be looking at is the in-between run of the European. And it's coming out now, so I got to see how far along it is. And it might not be out far enough. And naturally, it's not. I'm trying to match up to see, now that I'm able to see the in-between, I can actually see the in-between runs of the European, but I can't show them to you. But it's not out far enough. It only is out until Saturday morning. And I'm going to just take a look. Unfortunately, I wish it were out further, but it's not. Okay, hang on one second, folks. Let's see if the precip, if I can get that. But this is good to know, because now I can at least see the in-between runs. I can't see, let's see, operational, how far out is this? Okay, let's see how far I can go. Unfortunately, also not only out to 90 hours. I can tell you that it actually matches up at 90 hours. Not too it matches up pretty well with the NAM. Okay, so if that's a clue, but unfortunately, I was hoping that we would have most of it out by this time. I was trying. Most of the European runs from 1 p.m. Eastern to 2 p.m. Eastern, and I was thinking that the ATZ would run out between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. That would be the logical time, but it's not out far enough yet. But at least throughout 90 hours, it matches pretty well with the dam. But we really need to kind of see. Further out than that, and I don't know that we're going to be able to do that tonight. So I think that probably gives you a good idea of where we're going weather-wise. Southside Boxing, nice to see you. One of my regulars from the other side of the Atlantic, and also Alfred Phillips from Wainwright, Alaska. He has the distinction, I believe, of being my northernmost viewer, watching from the north coast of Alaska. The Euro, Brian, did trend a little further north today. We're going to need to see a bit more. If we're talking about getting snow up to north of New York City and Long Island, there is time for this, and we discussed at length earlier, of course, the issues, and it's all about the northern part of the jet stream. Mon Hébert, Happy New Year to you. Nice that you're on here. You need some dry time down in Atlanta and in the southeast because of all the rain recently, and I'll take a look off camera. Sometimes unless somebody asks, I do pay attention, but I don't always pay that close attention. Rainfall, with this system coming out for late this week and the weekend, that is going to bring perhaps another couple of inches of rain to Atlanta. The snow might make it in the mountains of northeastern Georgia with this if the cold air drains far enough south. So that's something we'll probably have to watch closely. The more suppressed this system is, by the way, the better the chances of bringing the colder air further south into the southeast. And if we think back to the system in early December, we were able to bring that cold air down into the mountains of northeastern Georgia and northwestern South Carolina. So it might wind up doing it again this time around. But we'll see. Maps are courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com. That should be your go-to site so that you could watch, you could see all the weather models within easy reach. Golden Twister 888, you in Boston, yeah, you've gotten very, very little snow. Boston has been, really the symbol of the snow drought. At least New York City had their 6.4-inch snowfall. And by the way, that was back on November 15th. So I think we're at 54 days since the last accumulating snow of greater than a trace has fallen in the New York City area, in New York City of itself, in Central Park. That's a pretty long stretch. So if we wasn't for that surprise November storm, we'd be sitting here with nothing for the season so far. Those are I just want to at least to give you perspective. The way this winter has gone so far, we're at January 8th, which is not that far. But take what we've seen since that November 15th snow, and if you extend it out to the middle of March, those are the kind of winters we had in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they were, for snow lovers, they were just absolute torture. The occasional storm, in between rain events, it would get cold, then the cold air would pull out, it would warm up and rain. This was a signature that lasted on and off for almost 30 years. That has not been the signature for the last 18 years. So this is actually a bit unusual. So those of you who are a bit younger, who don't reach as far back as I do, you've kind of, in my area, if you're watching, you're as a snow lover, you've been really spoiled, and spoiled quite greatly with regards to the kind of weather and the kind of storms that have happened since the year 2000. It's been a whole totally different world. So anyway, sub-zero ice fog for Alfred Phillips in Wainwright, Alaska. We've got the fog part, but not the the sub-zero. Arne Barole, maybe we'll get something like what happened in March. Well, you know, you've got this split in the vortex like it happened last year in February. Now, let's see if we can get some off-the-wall blocking, which is what we had last year, and not really seeing too much signs of it on the models right now. But you never know as we get deeper into January and head over into the month of February. Kevin Walsh. Hey, Kevin, nice to see you on board. It took me a second to make the connection. I believe the last 15 winters, New York City has had abundant snow in 12, though the years it doesn't want to snow, we practically get nothing. And that's really how it works, Kevin. That's quite true. 11-12 was really the last subpar year, and we've had the last 6 have been above, and 8 out of the last 9, possibly 9 out of the last 10 have been above normal. And if you look back at New York City snow records, even in the 1880s, you've never had such a streak of that many above average years. In fact, most of the time, if you have above average years, you're usually followed by 2 or 3 below average years. So this has been a really highly unusual stretch that snow lovers have enjoyed. And hey, you know what? You could wind up, you could certainly wind up snapping back to this as we get into February. I don't know. I'm not, I've been very very open about the fact, as far as the long range is concerned, folks, I have a tough time getting my head around it, and I always have. So I stay inside my 2-week bubble, and I'm very, very happy. Nothing ever surprises me, and for me, the fun of it is to watch it all evolve on the weather models. All right, folks, I am going to put an end to this right now at 51 minutes into our program. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's been a lot of fun. So let me once again remind you that tomorrow night, Joe Rao will be joining me. We will have Dr. Judah Cohen on, and he will be talking all about the whole polar vortex split in the stratosphere and what has happened so far and what he thinks will happen going down the road. And it's a forecast, okay, folks? It's not gospel. It's a forecast, and it could go wrong. And I'm sure if it does, that's when you look back and you see, well, what did I miss? So a lot to learn here, and I will be front and center in the classroom. Those of you who enjoy weather very much, you might consider joining my platform on Patreon. It's a great way, by the way, to support what I'm doing here with the live streams and everything else. But on Patreon, we are not only covering weather fairly frequently as we go through the day with posts on and off all day long, live streams just for Patreon members. You can message me anytime. But we also, starting today, kind of had a little bit of a classroom experience with the members. Gave them the upper air maps and asked them to tell me, what they thought of what was going on. And this is, I think, a really good way. If weather is your thing, this is a really good way of getting really your hands in it and involved with it and slowly coming to an understanding of how the atmosphere works. It's a subscription site. It's just $2 a month. And a lot of folks that are on there seem to be very happy with it. So give it a look. I've put the link up on the chat board there, and there's a link on the live stream and the descriptor to this live stream and the descriptor to this video. Let me also, for those of you who have an Android device, you can access a lot of my website posts and even watch the live streams, including the Joe and Joe Weather Show on Facebook. If you're not on Facebook and you got an Android device, then download my free weather app, okay? And there it is, the link for that. It's also in the, just go to Google Play and put in my name, Joe Chaffee, and download it and enjoy. It's absolutely free. It is a minimal amount of advertising on it, and that's it. So have at it. There'll be an update coming out on that soon, and we're still waiting for Apple to give us the go ahead with the iPhone version. These tech companies, they take forever. Okay. All right. So tonight, Joe and Joe Weather Show on Facebook. For those of you on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. That's going to be at roughly 9:20 Eastern time. Then tomorrow we'll have probably have a Patreon live stream tomorrow morning to update the weather models, and then tomorrow night 7 o'clock Joe Rao with Dr. Judah Cohen. And before you go, let me one more time. Let's see if I can. Do we have out enough? Hang on. Let me try one more time. Okay. And let's see. And unfortunately, I only have out to 90 hours, so it's still not out far enough. All right, folks, have a great night, and we will see you either a bit later on the Joe and Joe Show or tomorrow right here on YouTube. Good night, everybody.